So, hello everybody and welcome to our pitch at the Paris Peace Forum. My name is Catherine Vogel and I co-coordinate the GIZ Data Lab. I am presenting today our risk model to prevent gender-based violence, which we do together with the Data Pop Alliance and and with me here today is my colleague Valentin Kruspo. Unfortunately, due to travel constraints and technical issues, our friends from Data Pop Alliance could not be part of this session here today, but we will do our best to take over their role. So what are we going to talk about today? So we're going to talk about the issue of gender-based violence. In Latin America, 1 out of 3 women have experienced sexually or physical abuse violence by an intimate partner, all women between 15 and 46 years old. And in Mexico, in specific, the 10 women are killed every day, and 66% of women over 15 have suffered one incident of sexual violence throughout their lives. So this was before the pandemic hit. And now imagine you have this very severe situation, and then here comes a pandemic, which makes you stay at home, stay close to a possibly violent partner, which makes you, which gives the fact that there are economic issues, the fact that there are health issues within the community, etc. The situation is far worse. And so just imagine coming from where we came from and now you have this situation. It's not that we start from scratch. The government of Mexico has done a lot about the problem. They have a legal framework to protect women who experience violence in Mexico. They have campaigned to promote the use of support and report services. They have there's a strong civil society organization and a landscape which supports all initiatives against gender-based violence. And there are a lot of emergency hotlines for survivors of gender-based violence. But the fact is that this is not enough. The problem is that we do not have enough information in order to best design our interventions with regards to the fight against gender-based violence. We need to better understand when and where women and girls are at risk. We need to better understand where the drivers of violence are. But however, the times of social distancing and lockdowns, the safe data collection efforts, they become really almost impossible, and we need new ways to do this. So the challenge of gaining insights on this shadow pandemic, as it's called, there is the culture of silent and underreporting, and they are and the survivors usually do not report incidents or ask for institutional support because it's such a taboo subject. The data collection is so difficult, especially in times of a pandemic when you can't go from door to door. And also the fact that you would marginalize special areas and that you would put the victims and survivors in danger prevents us from doing such a direct data collection. But also the data availability is limited in other areas other than, in this case, Mexico City. So we concentrate a lot on Mexico City, where we have a good database, but in all other aspects and geographical areas in the country, it is the data availability is very, very scarce. So what we try to contribute is a possibility which gives data-driven insights on how we use existing data sources and combine them to new ways to provide relevant information for decision makers, activists, and many more. And we need to do this in the right way. And I'm going to hand over now to my colleague, Valentin, who will present you the model more in detail.
Thank you very much, Catherine. And we've learned about the context. We have learned about our broad approach. What I will do now is I will dive deep into the technicalities of the prototype, and namely the risk model that is at the heart of our project. We conducted the prototype in 3 steps. Firstly, we mapped the prevalence of violence across the country. Secondly, we assessed the risk factors associated with violence. And thirdly, we trained our risk model and then extrapolated it to the rest of the country from Mexico City, where the training took place. The first step was all about finding out where is the best data. My colleague Catherine already basically told you that in Mexico, when you take stock of the available data, you get to the point where you find out really quickly that data is really scarce. What we found is that in relation to other regions, Mexico City is among the best in availability of, in terms of data availability when it comes to information on violence against women and girls. And that's why we chose it as a very good starting point for our project. Usually data on violence against women and girls is collected by ministries, such as health ministries or women's ministries, sometimes also the security ministries, but it's not always out in the public domain. In Mexico City, we are fortunate to have access to 2 public databases, mainly the Línea Mujeres telephone helpline, and secondly, the crime reports, which come from the Attorney General's office. The Línea Mujeres helpline is a nationwide helpline, mostly directed towards women. However, mainly women from Mexico City and the surroundings use it. It offers support in 3 areas, mainly legal, psychological, and medical health. The crime reports offer information on a wide array of crimes, also including crimes in the realm of violence against women and girls. When we talk about violence against women and girls, the point that we particularly focus on is the phenomenon of, or basically the problem of violence against women and girls in the domestic sphere. On the right side of the slide, you can see, maybe it's a bit small because of the shared screen, but you can see the aggregated numbers from January to September of both of those indicators that we looked at, aggregated and compared between 2019 on the left and 2020 on the right. Without wanting to go too much into the details of the absolute development, what we can see here is that these indicators actually go into the different directions. While there is a quite simple explanation in terms of the crime reports, because a lot less crimes have been reported during the lockdown, which took place in 2020, what we definitely see is that it's not straightforward to just go to one indicator and say, this will tell us how violence evolved. We have to really look into the quality of the data, and we have to really make sure that biases are there. After having looked into the quality of the model, after having looked into the data on violence against women and girls, we then went into our second step, which was to assess the risk factors associated with violence. We used a wide variety of traditional and non-traditional data sources, such as surveys and administrative data from the traditional side. But what makes our approach particularly unique is we combined that with non-traditional data, which is mainly human mobility data stemming from Facebook and Google. This data is anonymized and even rather aggregated, so we don't look at particular people, we rather look at violence trends and the factors that go into it on a municipal level in Mexico. While it would be too much to go into all of the correlations in the little time we have for the pitch, we would like to stress one point that has received a lot of attention recently, namely COVID itself. We see a graph, and on the horizontal line, we see the number of crime reports. On the vertical, we see the helpline calls. The dots, the bigger they get, the more intensity of COVID, so to say. And all of these numbers you see there are expressed per 100,000 inhabitants of the municipalities of Mexico that you see mapped there. And what you see is we don't see a clear pattern in this. So COVID itself does not seem to be related necessarily, or doesn't trigger the violence. So it's not a clear kind of like push factor. But what we see here, without wanting to go into too much further detail, is we have one point at dot at the very bottom left, and some on the very bottom right. And what we would expect if we look at the violence level is at the bottom left there to be low levels of violence, and in the upper right there to be high levels of violence. However, coming back to data quality and the things that we have to take into account, the dot you see on the bottom left is a very rural municipality. It's very far away, marginalized to an extent. And just this point that it is not so easy to report crimes, it is marginalized in that sense, could also lead to the fact that it is more biased and has higher rates of underreporting. So even while we looked at the risk factors, we saw again, we really have to do it right. We really have to work hard on data quality. And actually, we never look at just one violence indicator, but rather we look at indexes and kind of combine that in order to try to rule out as much as possible the problems. However, while there are problems with data quality, we still gain a lot of very interesting insights, and the real kind of like novelty comes in the third step, which is the step where we're currently working on. After having mapped the violence data, assessed the risk factors, and collected the necessary data that goes with it, we then went to Mexico, or kind of in the case of Mexico City, trained a model to estimate the levels of violence as well as possible, and to reach a model that predicts these values as close to reality as possible. What we then do in the next step is we extrapolate this model to the other regions of Mexico, where in many cases data is still missing. It's simply not there. We cannot estimate, given that we look at data that itself suffers from underreporting, etc., absolute numbers. What we can estimate, though, in points where currently there is no information at all, is trends, allowing policymakers, activists, and so on to compare trends on municipalities and regions that have no information right now over time. And we really are working hard on this to get as good results as possible. So now, after having wrapped up with the third step, I would like to hand back to my colleague Catherine to tell you more about how we work and what the following steps are.
Thank you very much, Valentin. When I started the presentation, I talked about that we need to do it right. And it's very important that we implement a safeguard for all our activities in such a sensitive issue. So what we did in this project together with the Data Pop Alliance and GIZ Mexico was to implement something we call CODE. CODE stands for Council for the Orientation of Development of Ethics. And this code comprises 5 different functions, or has 5 different functions. The code advises us, this committee advises us on the relevance of what we do, on all ethical aspects, on data protection, on how to integrate it into the community, and on the visibility and awareness raising. Within the code, we have organizations like UN Women, like Fondo Semillas, like Justicia para las Mujeres. So there are grassroots civil society organizations included, which help us to bring this broad, strong civil society movement into what we do, because the civil society has a strong role and mandate in fighting gender-based violence, not only in Mexico, but worldwide. So where are we going from here? So as my colleague Valentin already said, we're about to finalizing the model and to validate the insights we have gained from the analysis. We want to make sure that the data and the analysis are being used. We want to make sure that they help to formulate the right policy recommendations and that they leverage the data for potential advocacy campaigns. We have already scaled up our pilot in two other countries, together with the Unidas network, which is a strong women's network. and is supported by GIZ. We are replicating it in Bogota and Sao Paulo, and also together with the Data Pop Alliance. And our long-term approach is that we would like to apply the concept in different places in Latin America to improve the data availability and to produce insights to help fight against gender-based violence. So we have 3 recommendations, and if this speaks to you, I would just want to say 3 main points. What needs to be or can be done elsewhere, so you can build upon what we're doing and use it in other contexts. You have to take care that you do it right, that you integrate the perspectives of the survivors of gender-based violence, of civil society organizations, and that you implement a safeguard organization or committee like the Code, and then do it better. We invite you cordially to join us on a way towards a continuous improvement of our approach to continuously fighting against the increasing gender-based violence lately. So thank you so much, and I'm very much looking forward to your questions right now. Yeah, this question. I'm just reading them through. Thank you for our moderator for giving them up to us. I will, one question is, in terms of next steps, can you give some examples of how this data could be used to shape policy responses? Yeah, here a cooperation with our local partners is key. So GIZ Mexico is cooperating very closely with the government of Mexico City, and as such, they can use the data and the insights they have gained out of this analysis in order to improve their recommendations and their policy interventions. But we have to say that we will not ever get out of this model a very concrete number of incidents or rating of prevalence of incidents. It's more like it helps the government to look at certain areas. It helps us to understand trends, and it helps us to open our eyes to things we haven't realized before. So there's another question. How replicable is this approach outside Mexico's context? Do you think the risk factors impact is very localized or generalizable? I'm going to ask my colleague Valentin to take that one over.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. So I think the approach in itself it's a strong word, but it is very much replicable, but it always depends on the data situation. So we are, as my colleague Catherine already implied, we are currently already together with other stakeholders within GIZ and Data Pop Alliance doing not a scale up, but not a complete replicate, because we always have to kind of tailor it to the context. But we're already working in Sao Paulo and Bogota. So in the end, it really comes down to what data is available. What we have as a good point in Mexico is that the risk factors, at least in most cases, we have them on a broader availability than the violence measures. And that's why the risk model in itself, and to train a model that is based on the so to say input factors, which are the risk factors, this estimates the outcome, which is the violence. It works very well. If we have data scarcity per se, it may be more difficult. In terms of localized, that is of course something that has to be taken into account. And I would again say that having the civil society and local actors on board in that step is crucial to make sure that the insights that we gain are actually reliable. And yes, I would now hand back to my colleague.
Thank you. Wow, so how do you hope this edition of the Paris Peace Forum will support the work of your project? Well, so that's an excellent question. The Paris Peace Forum has the mandate to gather the thought leaders together, active people who are willing to do something about policy issues, etc. One thing which is of utmost importance here is awareness raising. So the Paris Peace Forum as such is a great place to raise awareness on, first of all, the fact that how huge the challenge of gender-based violence is, and then that there are opportunities out there which can complement the ongoing initiatives against gender-based violence, but also that these things, these data-driven approaches, really need to be done right. They need to have safeguards, they need to involve civil society, etc., etc. So we hope that through bringing that message across, the data-driven approaches are increasingly used, but also that they are used in the right way. Another question which is quite similar to what we've talked about, but it sheds a little bit light on a different input or a different aspect. The question is, as this is fundamentally a behavioral problem, how do you think about ensuring that technical or technological solutions, such as the model, have a real concrete impact for people? That's an excellent question, and we've talked a little bit about it, but as you rightly say, at the end of data, there is people. As Trisha Shetty, the president of the Paris Peace Forum steering committee, said here today. And we really need to take this into account. So it's not only about doing something for the sake of doing it, it's about impact. So that, therefore, the cooperation with civil society and with the government is crucial in order to advance with regards to that. Yes, it is behavioral, but there are aspects which can be tackled, and there are also survivors which need to be protected. So there are a lot of things which can be done, even though, of course, at the end of the day, such a data analytics approach will not be able to change the behavior of one single person. Do we have any more questions? Yeah, there's another question, and maybe Valentin, do you want to take this? The question is, given the model is based on mapping the prevalence of underreported incidents of violence, how did you test or validate the extrapolations and outputs you ended up with?
Okay, very good, very technical question. The answer is, we're still refining that step, because this is really the crucial one, right? So first we have to get the model right in Mexico, and then we have to see how does it perform. But frequently the violence data in the other areas is missing. So even to just say, okay, this is how it performs in that area is very, very tough to judge. So really getting the model right in Mexico itself, that's the crucial point. And we had various approaches, and I don't want to go into too much detail about how we're currently doing it. I just can invite all of you to get in contact with us via the platform, via email. But in short, what we're doing now, and to try to ensure that our extrapolation works particularly or as good as possible, is we're using, firstly, and that's now a bit quite technical, but we're using an unsupervised learning approach to cluster municipalities in Mexico City. And then we have 4 clusters, and we train 4 different models. And these 4 different models are then used for the extrapolation. And given how close the regions we talk about, or we look at, or we want to extrapolate the model to resemble one of these clusters, that's the model that's going to be chosen accordingly. In regard to underreporting, that's always a serious problem. We have a number of technical steps that we undertake there. It would take quite a long time to get into detail on that. I would very much like to continue that discussion afterwards and go into more detail there. But now back to Catherine.
Thank you. I think we have no more questions. If there are more questions, I think I would have time for one. And I just wait 1 second if we get one in the chat. This seems not to be the case. I know that this is a little, that we always have like a couple of seconds. The live stream is later than currently, but I think Dan, I think we're done. Thank you very much for your attention. We're very much looking forward, as we said, on continuing this discussion. Of course, we are available at the Paris Peace Forum platform, and we are very much looking forward to getting in touch with you, hearing your thoughts on it, and on learning from you. So thank you very much on behalf of the GIZ Data Lab and the Data Pop Alliance, and enjoy the rest of these exciting 3 days in Paris. Bye-bye.